Hello, my name is Sam Gallegos, and for my final written assignment for this leadership block, I want to talk about the effects of mega churches and the impact, whether that is good or bad, what they have on people. So before we begin, we should get an idea of what a mega church is. A mega church is a church with 2,000 plus members that make about roughly over $1 million a year. And a little bit of background: the first mega church was actually the Moody Church, which was built in 1886 in Chicago, Illinois. A little background on that. So he um, had like child care Sunday school, and more kids in the inner city kept coming. And so he was like, okay, I need to go plant a church. So he ends up planting a church. And then throughout the years, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where there were over 2,000 people. The most famous U.S. megachurch is in Houston, Texas, which is Lakewood Church, which is the home of the famous pastor Joel Osteen. I have my opinions about Joel Osteen. We will get into that later on in the presentation. Um, with megachurches, it can be very hard to establish a connection with like people in the church because it's so big. When I lived in Seattle, Washington, I went to a small church, and after every sermon, the pastor would come up to me and he would ask how I'm doing. He would see like how my day was, how's my spiritual walk, how's everything going, and he always knew me by my first name. When I moved to Phoenix, Arizona, I went to a mega church, Scottsdale Bible Church, and I went there for 7 plus years, and I never even met the head pastor, one time. Um, I think it's important with leadership. Uh, like the main purpose should be to serve others. In a mega church, that can be very difficult. There's definitely ways to do it, but it's very difficult to do. Servant leadership. What makes a good leader in a church? Well, first, I think with mega churches, you need to have a good marketing team. You need to have good social media. You look at Lakewood Church with Joel Osteen, and he has Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. He's posting stuff throughout the week to keep his church updated about what's going on that week or what's going to go on that Sunday. Sometimes I find with mega churches that they find it more about building the brand than actually like talking about the message and impacting people. Um, I feel like Joel Osteen personally takes advantage of having a mega church. I mean, he has sold over 8.5 million copies of textbooks or books that he is published, and he's made millions off it. And his church is making millions. It's on TV every weekend, and I just think personally that that money should be aimed to plant smaller churches in inner cities that don't have anything, or donate to homeless shelters or something. Um, so I just think the money in a mega church really gets involved with the main focus of going to church, and that is, to share God's message to other people. I think some key verses when it comes to church. First one, Colossians 3:16. Let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. And preaching the word. I think we need to be prepared no matter what, no matter the circumstance, the situation, even if you're outside of church or you're in church, like you need to be ready no matter what. Um, to build someone up. You never know. You never know who you could impact and share Christ to. And when money's involved, when it comes to mega churches, it honestly frustrates me. Um, and another thing too is the Bible doesn't encourage money. It's not money driven, but it does encourage us to gather together with one another and praise God, worship, pray together, and sing his name out loud. So like I said earlier in my presentation, um, I think there is a lot of money oriented drive in the megachurch scene. Um, on here in this PowerPoint, I'm not going to read them all to you. I just put some specific verses on greed. And one of them that stood out to me was Luke 12:15, which says, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And you know what? Honestly, that just brings me back to what my dad always tells me. You know, my dad, I was very fortunate growing up. My dad made great money. And he always tells me whenever I come back home that, money is not, it means nothing. He goes, when I die, all this stuff stays here. The only thing that's coming with me is, my love for Christ. And, when money gets involved with church, especially when we're trying to impact other people, it gets really frustrating. Why mega church values misalign with biblical lessons? Again, it all goes back to money for me. I mean, Joel Osteen's making millions of dollars because of his church. We don't go to church for millions of dollars. We go because we want to serve the Lord. And I think Joel Osteen takes advantage of the fact that he has a lot of money and a lot of power. His church services are televised, and it almost feels more like a concert or like entertainment than actual worship and focusing on Christ. I feel like sometimes the worship is very, like I said earlier, it's like a concert. People are like celebrating almost the worship pastor and not really like praising Jesus. I can say this because I actually attended Joel Osteen's service a few years back with my baseball team in Houston, Texas. And it did not feel like church to me. It just didn't. It felt more like a concert. I think the leadership is it feels almost kind of fake to me. You know what? And maybe it's not fair for me to say that because I don't know Joel Osteen, one on one. And maybe if I got to know him personally more, and I think he should do that with the people in his church, I think we would have a better understanding of what he is about. But with it being a mega church, he doesn't, take that time to get to know everyone one on one, which I mean, that would be hard to do with 2,000 people. So yeah, so in conclusion, um, I am not a fan personally of mega churches. I've seen both sides of it. Um, I think that it's a huge misconception of what we're trying to get out of church on Sundays. Um, currently I'm going to this church in Arvada called Revive Church. And, every time I go, the pastor always comes up to me, knows me by my first name, and he's always asking how I'm doing, or how was my week, or how can I be praying for you? And when you have a leader like that in the church do that, it makes you feel really good because like that's someone leading your church. That's someone that actually takes the time and cares about you. Who isn't trying to make millions and millions and millions of dollars. That's not what his goal is. That's not what his goal is for the church. Um, I just think if we limit mega churches and have more smaller based churches, I think we can bring more people to Christ. I think the mega church is a misconception. And I think personally, like I said earlier, I think mega churches can be used with all the money they have. I think they should plant smaller churches in areas that don't have the money to have churches, where like people that have never even been able to go to church can go to these churches and then learn about Jesus, and then from there accept Christ, and then from there bring others to Christ. I think if we plant more small churches, we will focus more on Christ and less on money. Thank you for taking this time to listen to my presentation. Thank you.